The media frenzy was out of control. Cameras flashed, reporters yelled questions, and a stream of fans and critics waited outside the courthouse. It was one of those mornings when the city held its breath. The clouds hung low, threatening rain, as if nature were aware something extraordinary was about to happen. Outside the grand courthouse, people had already assembled hours ahead of the first hearing. Fans held onto their phones, hoping to get a glimpse of Kody Brown or one of his wives. They were there in support of the family that they had supported for years on Sister Wives. They were there in judgment too, their curiosity driven by rumor and speculation, their heads shaking in disbelief as they whispered about the claims. Kody Brown, the family patriarch, was the first to arrive, emerging from a shiny black SUV. His normally placid and seemingly meditative face was tense. The gravity of the situation struck him. This wasn't television. This was real life, with real repercussions. As he approached the courthouse, cameras were at his heels, flashing incessantly, capturing every faint glimpse of concern and resolve. Behind him were his wives, each an individual presence in her own right. Meri, the first wife, appeared almost delicate, her complexion pale in the morning light. She had been with Kody the longest, and had endured the entire gamut of public attention. Her hand shook a little as she clung to her coat, showing only a glimpse of the tension bubbling beneath. Janelle, the second wife, radiated a quiet strength. Famous for her down-to-earth and sensible demeanor, she strode firmly, casting the occasional look at the throng without losing sight of the road ahead. Christine, the third wife, added a combination of elegance and drama. Her eyes revealed fear, but also determination. She was aware that this case might alter their lives' trajectory. And lastly, Robyn, the fourth wife, possessed an air of quiet authority. Usually the household's logistical mind, she appeared intent, as if orchestrating the day's steps like a general strategizing for an assignment. The courthouse itself was imposing, with its high stone pillars and rich doorways, giving an air of gravity and history. As the family approached, the commotion outside subsided into whispers. Inside, the courtroom was packed with reporters, legal monitors, and curious public citizens. Cameras were positioned in the corners, lenses trained on the bench where the judge would shortly take her seat. Microphones waited to record each and every word, and the air carried the faint scent of polished wood and suspense. The charges that had brought them before her were serious. Rumors of zoning infractions had circulated in the community for months, but they had now become a full-fledged legal matter. The neighbors had complained that the Browns' residence had become overcrowded, resulting in disruptions to what was intended to be a peaceful neighborhood. Social media rang with rumors. Was the family violating the law, or were they being picked on because of their polygamous way of life? Kody was aware that the courtroom would be the final exam of not only legality, but of perception as well. In a society which tended to misunderstand polygamy, appearances were just as important as facts. The family's every step, every utterance, every movement would be scrutinized and criticized. And whereas some viewed them as pacesetters of an unorthodox lifestyle, others viewed a waiting scandal. As the judge entered the courtroom, all attention turned immediately. Justice Mira Singh, who was infamous for playing by the book and her no-nonsense attitude, had an aura of authority that stifled even the whispers in the back of the courtroom. Her robes rustled as she approached the bench, and she eyed the courtroom with piercing, intelligent eyes, registering every aspect of the sight before her. Kody and his wives stood up as a gesture of respect, their steps precise, as if practiced through years of public demonstrations. The first few minutes of the trial were charged. The prosecution started to lay out their side of things, talking about neighbors' complaints, violations alleged, and possible effects of the Browns' way of life on the surrounding community. Every sentence seemed to ring off the walls of the courtroom, heightening the tension. The defense team, headed up by veteran lawyer Mr. Rajiv Kapoor, listened intently, ready for any potential argument. In contrast to the tension, there was also a feeling of oneness among the Browns. They were holding hands, exchanging soft glances, and leaning on one another for support. The strength was not merely in quantity, it was in the long-standing bond forged over many years. Meri pinched Kody's hand, Janelle gave Christine a reassuring nod, and Robyn stood guard over the family. Even in the face of scrutiny and potential legal consequences, they were a team. Outside of the courtroom, there was still a media storm. Helicopters hovered overhead, live streaming reported the event, and social media reeled with speculation. Is Kody Brown in jeopardy? One trending headline read, "Sister Wives in Trouble." Another queried, "The city was divided." Some rallied around the family passionately. Others attacked them mercilessly. It was something no reality TV program could ever truly replicate. And at the center of it all were the Browns. Inside, the initial witness was summoned, a neighbor who had made the original complaint. The questioning was courteous but emphatic, detailing fears over the number of residents in the Brown household and disturbance complaints. Kody's gaze stayed fixed on the witness, but his thoughts were elsewhere, thinking about how much evidence they had crafted, and the defense strategy. The judge heard attentively, occasionally making scribbled notes. She was not impressed with the drama in the park or the media spectacle. She had laser-sharp focus on the facts. And as the Browns sat in proximity, each pondering how far they had traveled, it was evident that this was not merely a legal fight. It was a test of strength, faith, and the power to stand together when the world was watching. By day one's end, the courtroom was abuzz. Some departed satisfied for having indulged their curiosity. Others departed wondering if they had misjudged the Browns. What was certain? This was not another reality television tale. This was a real-life drama of great stakes, personal stakes, and life lessons about family loyalty and persistence. Kody, the wives, and their lawyer briefly spoke outside the courtroom, quietly but firmly. They were aware of the difficult days to come, but had been reassured by the first session that solidarity and forethought were their strongest weapons. The journalists' cameras caught them departing, and social media erupted once more with speculation and commentary. As the sun began to set over the courthouse, the Brown family returned home. The trial had only just begun, but already it had revealed the intense pressure of living a life under scrutiny, the complexity of balancing public perception with personal truth, and the unwavering strength of a family determined to stand together. The initial session of this courtroom drama had come to a close, but the tale was barely halfway through. For the Browns, every move from this point forward would be monitored, dissected, and remembered. And for the viewer, both interested and judgmental, it was the start of a tale that would entertain them for weeks to come. Every secret has a way of coming to light, and today the Browns were about to face theirs. The second day of the courtroom drama opened with a tension so thick it felt almost tangible. The media was already lining the streets outside, cameras pointed at the courthouse, recording every arrival. Reporters whispered eagerly about what might happen next. Would new evidence emerge? Would a shocking witness change everything? Inside, the mood was just as electric. But now the Browns were not merely battling accusations. They were revealing secrets long buried under assumptions and rumor. The prosecution opened by producing neighbors as witnesses. Some of the residents spoke of annoyances, complaints about noise, parking problems, and perceived disruption created by the large Brown family. One elderly neighbor's voice shook a little as she testified to what she termed chaotic mornings and too many cars. The words read relatively unimposing on paper, but in court they seemed like an oncoming storm. Kody sat stoically beside his wives. His gaze occasionally darted to the defense team, silently urging them to stay calm. Meri's hand rested lightly on his. Janelle leaned slightly forward, listening intently, and Christine's eyes reflected a mixture of fear and resolve. Robyn sat with a notebook in front of her, ready to take notes, her mind already calculating the defense strategy. Then the first bombshell hit, a one-time Brown family employee, a person who had resided in close proximity to the household for years, was summoned to testify. Neha Sharma, a young woman who had worked for the family assisting them with some administrative duties, uncovered something that stunned everyone. Her testimony shook the courtroom. "I saw Kody with a city official last year," Neha started, her voice unsure. "They were talking about permits. And I don't know, but it seemed like there was some sort of pressure to do something to ignore certain things." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Reporters took furious notes. Cameras zoomed in on the Browns' faces, catching a moment of stunned surprise. The prosecution latched onto the moment, implying that this testimony indicated inappropriate behavior or even manipulation of city officials. But the defense had anticipated. Mr. Rajiv Kapoor, Kody's chief lawyer, leaned forward, his voice soft yet authoritative. Sharma, he started, are you implying that my client ever did anything outside of the law? Or are you simply narrating a normal conversation about legal permits? Neha paused, then explained. I don't know. It seemed suspicious, but I just can't be sure. The courtroom murmured. The defense quickly emphasized that suspicion was not evidence. The tension subtly shifted. What at first appeared to be a devastating disclosure was now being reinterpreted. Then came a witness still more sensational. Christine's estranged sister Priya had asked to be heard. The judge permitted it, and the courtroom fell silent as she entered the stand. Priya had a checkered past with the family, having been in conflict over matters of a personal nature and lifestyle. Some there wondered whether her evidence would be more emotional than factual. I've noticed things that concern me, Priya started, her voice edgy. I think the family has ignored some laws concerning their residents. I've noticed work being performed without proper permits. And I think they've attempted to conceal aspects of their way of life from the general public. The courtroom reacted immediately. Cameras caught Kody blinking slowly, taking in every word, while Meri's lips pressed into a thin line. Janelle leaned slightly toward Kody, whispering a quiet word of reassurance. Christine's expression was pained. Her sister's words felt like an attack, even if they were partly true. Robyn stayed calm, her notebook open, ready to counter each claim with documented evidence. The prosecution attempted to cloak Priya's words as evidence of willful deception. The language created a sensationalized narrative for the outside audience, and the web-surfing voyeurs, a well-known family, who lived an atypical lifestyle to say the least, potentially flouting the law in front of the world's eyes. And then the defense team struck back beautifully. Mr. Kapoor led Janelle to the witness stand, and her evidence was a game-changer. Assured, calm and authoritative, she explained the family's painstaking attempt to obey local laws. She produced official records, receipts and permits that testified to the fact that all the additions and renovations had been carried out legally. Your Honor, Janelle asserted, we have always placed the utmost importance on obeying the law. Any building or remodeling of our homes has been inspected and sanctioned by the city. Accusations to the contrary are founded upon misunderstanding, not reality. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge appeared to shift forward slightly, as if drinking in every word. The story of a family openly flouting the rules was collapsing. Robyn testified next, giving a careful description of how the family maintained records of changes to property, utilities and legal documents. She explained the difficulty of managing so large a household, noting that openness and obedience were always priorities. Her testimony was exact, reasonable and convincing, a dramatic contrast to Priya's and other witnesses' heated testimony. And then there was Meri, normally the most reserved of the wives, who spoke with her heart. We live our life as a family, just as anyone else does, she said gently but firmly. Our lifestyle is unorthodox, I suppose, but it is legal and it's honest. We're not hiding from anyone. We simply live the way we feel is best for ourselves and our children. Her words resonated. The jury, the audience, and even the media appeared to sit up and take notice. For the first time in the trial, the Browns' human side, their family ties, their commitment, and their hardships, became impossible to deny. It was no longer just a tale of zoning infractions. It was about actual individuals undergoing judgment from a world that did not seem to understand them. The turning point was when the defense brought forward further evidence which totally altered the case. Security video, emails, and city letters were brought forward, and it was revealed how a number of the complaints had been wildly exaggerated. Some neighbors had testified to exaggerating minor ailments, and a city bureaucrat also stated that no actual serious infractions had been discovered. The prosecution's storyline of intentional wrongdoing started to unravel. The courtroom was abuzz with tension. What had begun as a relatively simple case against a polygamist family had become a tangled tale of misunderstandings, hyperbole, and personal grievances. The Browns were no longer defendants. They were representatives of a family struggling with the pressures of fame, public opinion, and the law. By the end of the session, it was apparent that the trial had reached a new stage. Secrets had been revealed, accusations had been refused, and the first genuine cracks in the prosecution case had emerged. The Browns left the courtroom hand in hand, their faces a blend of relief and remaining tension. Outside, the media went wild, speculating on what the next day would bring. But one thing was certain: the tale was by no means finished. As they returned to their own home, the burden of the revelations remained. They knew that the future days would require still greater courage, cohesion, and discernment. But in that moment, they had begun the journey of converting suspicion into understanding and possible judgment into truth. Secrets were revealed, but the true battle, one that would put their family bond, trust, and strength to the test, was only just unfolding. And for viewers watching the saga, the courtroom drama had never been more gripping. In the courtroom, each paper, each witness, and each word could make all the difference. Today, the Browns were stepping into the most dramatic period of their legal fight. The sunshine in the morning fell across the courthouse in long shadows, marking the beginning of yet another day in the sensationalized case that had drawn viewers from all over the country. Cameras filled the stairs outside. Reporters mumbled theories, and social media sites hummed with rumor. The world held its breath, wondering how the Browns would cope with the increasing pressures. Within the courtroom, the atmosphere was near electric. Kody sat at the defense table, his body poised slightly stiff but resolute. His wives stood alongside him, each a different manifestation of strength. Meri, the first wife, exuded quiet passion. Janelle, the second wife, an aura of calmness and reason. Christine, the third, emotion and passion. And Robyn, the fourth, poise and strategy, the organizational brain keeping the family on track. The prosecution did not waste a moment, calling forth forensic accountants and lawyers to supply evidence that looked complex, near impossible to decipher for anyone without training. Spreadsheets, graphs, and charts covered the courtroom, showing supposed infractions, possible penalties, and inconsistencies in Brown's real estate reports. Each piece of information seemed to indicate willful wrongdoing, or so the prosecution wished. The initial witness, a municipal zoning official, detailed the charges with care. "The property seems to be overoccupied," he stated, scanning papers, and some alterations were allegedly made without permits. His tone was even but had an air of authority. The courtroom hung on every syllable. Cameras zeroed in on Kody, his tiny frown, and on his wives, whose faces reflected concern and resolve. But the defense was prepared. Mr. Rajiv Kapoor, Kody's lawyer, stood up smoothly, his tone confident. "Your Honor, although these records might look suspicious at first glance, they do not take into consideration key evidence that proves total compliance with city codes." The defense then introduced a string of permits, emails, and approval letters from city authorities, demonstrating that all changes to the property had been sanctioned. The courtroom murmured. What had originally seemed like incriminating evidence was now being rewritten as procedural errors and minor miscommunications. Next came a dramatic twist. A surprise witness, a longtime neighbor who had previously filed complaints, took the stand. The prosecution had hoped this would reinforce their case, but the outcome was unexpected. "I admit," the neighbor began hesitantly, "that some of my earlier statements were exaggerated. The Browns have always been respectful and cooperative. Any disturbances were minor and temporary." Gasps filled the room. Cameras were trained on Kody, who permitted a small measured breath, and on his wives, whose faces moved from tension to guarded relief. Mr. Kapoor smiled slightly, aware that the story had started to turn in their direction. Then the hard work started, a step-by-step breakdown of the Browns' finances and property records. Expert witnesses carefully reconstructed spending, renovations, and house organization. For the prosecution, this was the strongest line of attack. If they could demonstrate anomalies in the Browns' accounts or imply deliberate transgressions, the case could tip their way. Then the defense countered splendidly. Robyn testified, leading the jury through the household's budgeting, renovations, and careful record-keeping. Every project, every expense, every alteration has been recorded, she said. We've provided all the permits, receipts, and approvals to the city. We're not trying to hide anything. Her patient and sequential explanation worked its magic. Even courthouse cynics nodded in agreement. The evidence, once complex and daunting, was being laid out in simple, logical fashion. The Browns' dedication to openness and accountability could no longer be denied. The prosecution attempted to take command, putting on additional witnesses and evidence of possible oversight or negligence. They emphasized small discrepancies in filing dates and raised doubt about whether the family acted willfully. But Kody's defense team dismantled each argument systematically. Janelle and Meri testified again, emphasizing the family's efforts to comply with the law despite the challenges of managing a household of their size. Christine added emotional testimony, describing the stress of public scrutiny and how it often led to misinterpretations of their actions. The court observed intently as the war of evidence grew stronger. Each paper, each letter, each witness statement was a weapon in the tug-of-war between defense and prosecution. The tension hung heavy in the air, yet the Browns were solid as a rock. They supported one another, exchanged knowing glances, and found sustenance in the union that had sustained them through years of public pressure. A major turning point came when Mr. Kapoor showed a video recording in which city officials were seen sanctioning some of the renovations neighbors had already alleged as unauthorized. The record was unambiguous and specific, leaving minimal scope for doubt. The prosecution's story of intentional breaking of the law began to fall apart, bit by bit. The jury appeared visibly to respond. Some of the jurors nodded knowingly, others muttered softly to themselves, and the judge wrote keen notes. The defense's tactic was successful by dissecting complicated evidence into clean, understandable chunks. They had turned the courtroom theatrics in the Browns' favor. But this was hardly the end of the session. The prosecution brought a further level of complication: the personal relationships and lifestyle of the family. They tried to imply that the unusual polygamous form had some bearing on the legality of their domestic arrangements. Flashbulbs popped as whispers spread through the public gallery. People gasped, others mouthed questions regarding morality, legality, and cultural norms. The Browns approached this challenge with dignity. Kody remained calm in responding to questioning, stating that their family arrangement was legal in their state and that management of their household strictly complied with zoning and safety requirements. All three wives reiterated the same message, offering clarity, consistency, and emotional impact. At the end of the day, it was evident that this session had rewritten the narrative in the courtroom. What started out as an apparently simple case against a well-known polygamous family had turned into a careful scrutiny of evidence, openness, and character. The Browns' credibility had been bolstered. The prosecution's story had been knocked off course, and spectators from across the nation were enthralled by the drama happening in real time. As the courtroom cleared, Kody and his wives met outside, pondering what had just transpired during the day. The media thronged around them, but the family stayed centered. They had made it through one of the most grueling phases of the trial, the fight of evidence, and came out stronger and more united. The drama was far from being resolved. Although the Browns had effectively refuted most of the accusations leveled by the prosecution, the legal and emotional battles were yet to come. Secrets still to be exposed, personal accounts, and the ultimate judgment were waiting for them. But at that time, they had achieved something important. An intact family, equipped with truth, preparation, and determination, could weather even the strongest legal confrontation. For viewers and for fans, the episode was a masterclass in courtroom drama, a blend of suspense, strategy, and emotional veracity. And for the Browns, a reminder that, in the face of public criticism and misunderstanding, their resilience was based on family, integrity, and the unshakable commitment to one another. Some battles are not won with papers or evidence alone, they are won with the heart. The fourth day broke with a thick atmosphere of expectation. News had traveled on social media and news channels that this session of the Browns' trial would be unusual. It was no longer about papers, licenses, or juridical details. Today, the court was going to listen to the voices of the family members themselves, their feelings, their challenges, and their realities bare before the public gaze. Within the courthouse, the press pushed and shoved, cameras angled in, and the benches were almost filled. The air was charged with anticipation and curiosity. Kody Brown was seated at the defense table, his normally unflappable countenance revealing the seriousness of the moment. His hands were folded before him, his eyes darting around the courtroom as if to psych himself up for the emotional tempest that was about to erupt. To his side, Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn sat in quiet solidarity. Each of the wives was a distinct presence in the room, a representation of the individual personalities fans of Sister Wives had grown accustomed to. Meri, the original wife, wore a gentle but resolute expression, bearing decades of experience with public scrutiny. Janelle radiated tranquil authority, while Christine's eyes sparkled with emotion, displaying vulnerability and fervor. Robyn herself was calm, as if she were the anchor, keeping the family grounded in the midst of chaos. The judge, Justice Mira Singh, arrived and demanded instant attention. Her arrival was firm but compassionate, a message that the court would be honoring the dignity of individual testimony yet not forgetting the law. The family briefly stood up out of respect, their actions almost ritualistic, as if paying homage to the seriousness of the hearing. The prosecution had planned to continue with witnesses and legal arguments, but Mr. Rajiv Kapoor, Kody's attorney, requested that the family provide personal testimonies. Your Honor, he said, to truly understand the circumstances of this case, it is essential that the court hear directly from the family about their experiences, struggles, and their commitment to lawful conduct. The judge concurred, opening the door for the most powerful and personal session of the trial. Kody Brown spoke first. Standing slowly, he made his way to the stand with a combination of grace and vulnerability. I've spent my life balancing the desires of my family with the judgment of the public, he said, his voice firm but tinged with feeling. We live a lifestyle that many can't see. We are not perfect. We are not above fault. But we are dedicated to living ethically and responsibly. The courtroom was quiet. Reporters dropped their cameras momentarily. Listeners leaned forward, and even the jury appeared entranced by the unvarnished sincerity in Kody's voice. He went on, relating the staggering difficulties of running a home with multiple wives and 18 children. Each day was a matter of careful orchestration, constant talk, and boundless sacrifice. It is not always easy, Kody conceded, but it is our way of life, and it is filled with love and dedication. Then Meri testified. She spoke softly, but every word carried a depth of emotion. I have been publicly shamed, personally tested, and at times questioned, for years, she admitted. I have felt alone, misunderstood, and at times helpless. But here today, with my family, I am reminded that together we are stronger than whatever the world can bring against us. Her testimony provided a portrait of resilience, vulnerability, and unyielding devotion. It was not only about a defense of their legal ground, it was about displaying the human face behind the headlines. Janelle trailed behind, her voice steady but firm. She spoke of the day-to-day mechanics of running a household of that size, the precise planning needed to juggle school runs, doctor's appointments, and job commitments. We are a family, she said. Not a sideshow, not a headline. Just a family trying to live responsibly and make a positive contribution to our community. Christine's testimony was the most moving of all. Her words trembled as she testified about the emotional cost of being under public scrutiny, the anxiety, stress, and criticism that tended to get too much. Our family is seen and people make assumptions, she said, struggling to hold back tears. They judge us without realizing the sacrifices, love, and challenges we deal with every day. The children bear the brunt of this as well. We are not perfect, but we have our hearts in the right place. Robyn, always calm, rose last. Her voice was measured, accurate, and affecting. She discussed her position as the bringer of order to the home, the enforcer of law, and the advocate for her co-wives and children. Our household functions openly and in respect for the law, she stated. Each decision we make is measured. Today we are not only here to defend ourselves in court, but to demonstrate to the world that a big family, leading an alternative lifestyle, can be law-abiding, responsible, and loving. The emotional testimony altered the atmosphere in the courtroom. What started out as a case about technicalities of law and supposed infringements had become an intensely personal story of family, courage, and truth. The jury, the media, and even witnesses could witness the individuals behind the news headlines. They were no longer simply a reality TV family of polygamists, a family fighting to protect their lifestyle, their decisions, and their honor. The prosecution tried to dispute the emotional burden, asking if emotions could take the place of legal adherence. But Mr. Kapoor rebutted proficiently. Your Honor, although facts are indispensable, grasping context, purpose, and human effort is just as vital in determining credibility and character of the individuals involved. The testimony of this family illustrates their lawful, responsible action and their sincere dedication to children and society. As the session went on, it was apparent that the Browns' genuine testimonies really took their toll. The jurors could be seen visibly shaken. A few jurors nodded as each of the wives gave their testimony, while others murmured softly, contemplating the testimony. The media even appeared surprised at the intensity of emotion and genuineness expressed by the family. A few of the public observers watching in overflow rooms or live streams were moved by the humanity of the testimony. I never knew the human aspect of this family, posted one observer on social media. They are like any other family, trying to be right by their children and community. By the close of the session, the air in the courtroom had been filled with an atmosphere of resolution, though still not legal triumph. The Browns had won over the attention, altering the scandal and suspicion narrative to humanity and integrity. They had demonstrated strength, solidarity, and a family's fortitude in the face of enormous public backlash. Outside the courthouse, photographers and journalists mobbed the family. Cameras clicked, microphones were thrust out, and fans cheered. Kody, his eyes serene but radiating quiet pride, spoke to the crowd. Today was about exposing the reality of who we are, he explained. Not just as individuals, but as a family. Our lifestyle may be unconventional, but it is built on love, responsibility, and honesty. Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn stood with him, together representing the message that had been so evident all day in the face of misrepresentation, misunderstanding, and adversity. Truth and family could not be overcome. The fourth episode of the courtroom drama was over, but the suspense was not yet through. There would be legal debates still, evidence would be probed, and the verdict was still awaited. But this was certain: the emotional witness had left an unforgettable imprint, showing that under the laws and charges, the Browns were a family tied together by love, strength, and an unshakable devotion to one another. For the audience, this session was life-changing. It made a courtroom fight into an engaging narrative of human emotion, courage, and solidarity. And for the Browns, it was a testament that even in the most glaring light, honesty, love, and perseverance could pierce the blackest of times. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes were fixed on the judge, as if the very walls were holding their breath in anticipation. After weeks of strained hearings, meticulous examinations, and tearful testimonies, the verdict day finally came. The city was alive with expectation, and news crews descended upon the courthouse like a flock of bees, every camera taking in every inch of the celebrity case. Twitter went wild with rumor mongering. Would the Browns be held accountable by the courts? Would their unorthodox lifestyle be weighed against the law at last? Within the courthouse, the mood was charged but strained. Kody Brown sat at the defense table, his body stiff but serene, hands crossed tightly. Each of his wives, Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn, sat next to him, radiating a blend of apprehension, optimism, and determination. The courtroom, filled with reporters, neighbors, and nosy citizens, was jammed beyond capacity. Cameras covered every inch, capturing every whisper, every glance, and every minute detail. Justice Mira Singh came into the courtroom, her robes billowing, her face peaceful and commanding. The instant she sat down on the bench, the room grew silent. All conversation ceased. The verdict was about to be given, and its effect was colossal. For the Browns, their family, and the image of unorthodox families worldwide. The judge cleared her throat, an indication that the words to be uttered would have the force of the law and the truth. Having reviewed all the evidence, testimonies, and documentation laid before this court during the course of this trial, and having taken into consideration the personal testimonies and character testimonies of the individuals involved, this court finds the Brown family to have acted in accordance with local legislation and regulation in the conduct of their household and property management. She started. A wave of relief spread throughout the courtroom. Kody's shoulders came down ever so slightly, and his wife's eyes shone with tears that hadn't been shed. For weeks they'd endured judgment, scrutiny, and public opinion, but this moment legitimized their strength, authenticity, and devotion to their family. The judge went on, making a point to distinguish between unconventional lifestyle and illicit activity. The court recognizes that the Brown family's polygamous lifestyle is non-traditional and open to public scrutiny and gossip. The law, however, is quite clear. Non-traditional family arrangements are not necessarily illegal. The evidence provided shows that the family has been open, compliant with zoning and property rules, and responsible in conducting their household. Outside, journalists wrote frantically, attempting to keep up with every detail. Social media blew up with responses, hashtags trending across the country, #Brown family innocent, #justice served, #sister wives court. The narrative was no longer about controversy. It was about justice, reality, and the victory of a family on the hot seat. The courtroom listened intently as the judge spoke about the conduct of the complainants and the backdrop of the allegations. The majority of the complaints presented were founded upon speculation, misconceptions, and individual issues as opposed to factual infringement. As much as the court values the fears of the public, it is essential that justice be directed by evidence and principle, not by perception or prejudice. Kody's attorney, Mr. Rajiv Kapoor, permitted himself a discreet, contented smile. He had taken his time to systematically tear apart the prosecution's case, presented lucid evidence, and emphasized the human context of the family's everyday existence. His tactical strategy had paid dividends, not merely legally, but ethically, affirming the fact that truth and preparation are strong weapons. Then, in a surprising moment to some in the audience, the judge spoke directly to the family. "Mr. Brown, and your wives, Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn, you have been an exemplary model of unity, transparency, and integrity. While the public eye that fixed itself upon you was fierce and sometimes unreasonable, your behavior has been in strict adherence to the law and the dictates of prudent family stewardship. This court applauds your tenacity and perseverance." There were tears. They flowed freely. Meri used a tissue to wipe at her eyes, and Christine had hugged Robyn, overcome with emotion. Janelle had taken Kody's hand, her fingers quivering slightly, and Kody had permitted himself a rare smile, the strain of weeks of tension finally lifting from his shoulders. Outside the courtroom, fans and supporters cheered. Some waited for hours, cameras in hand, capturing the momentous occasion. Many critics who had questioned the family's motives were left speechless, compelled to recognize the fairness and outcome of the legal process. For the Browns, this was more than a verdict. It was vindication. The family went to the press for a quick statement, Kody going first. "Today is a win not only for us, but for all families who live differently. Our lifestyle might be unorthodox, but it's rooted in love, responsibility, and respect for the law. We hope this case promotes understanding and not judgment." Meri spoke softly, adding, "We were subjected to scrutiny, criticism, and skepticism, but together made us tougher. Our family is strong, and today's result proves that strength." Janelle discussed the organizational issues of their day-to-day life, pointing out that juggling a big household took planning and harmony. Christine underlined the emotional cost of being under the public eye, and Robyn finished off with a reminder that transparency and integrity are the way forward when living in the public eye. Since every word was captured by the media, it was obvious that this verdict was not only a legal victory but symbolic. It depicted that non-traditional families, when being lived responsibly and openly, could succeed even amidst misconception or bigotry. The Browns' case struck a chord in audiences globally, a testament to resilience, togetherness, and courage under fire. The judge ended the session by making a strong but reassuring declaration. "Let this case be a precedent for fairness and justice. demonstrating that any family, no matter what its structure may be, should be judged on facts and integrity, rather than assumption and appearance. As the courtroom cleared, the Browns walked out together. Cameras snapped relentlessly, but the family remained together, smiling, holding hands, and sometimes whispering words of relief and thanks. Supporters chanted on the street, and for a fleeting moment the whirlwind of media and public scrutiny seemed like jubilation rather than condemnation. For Kody and his wives, this ruling brought an end to a traumatic chapter, and the start of a fresh emphasis on family, life, and public perception. They had weathered public judgment, court battles, and emotional ordeals, and came out stronger and more together than they ever were before. The Browns' courtroom drama turned from merely a headline or a TV show into a beacon of hope, integrity, and the strength of family. The world watched with bated breath as the journey progressed, heartened by the courage and integrity shown amidst tremendous pressure. As the sun dipped over the courthouse, Kody looked at his wives and said softly, "We did it together." And within the plain, sincere words was the whole saga in essence, the victory of love, unity, and truth over misunderstanding, fear, and doubt.